Hi, everybody. Thank you for waiting. Rabbi's on her way. She's getting a water. So. She'll be here shortly. Hey, Melissa.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. I'm muting myself because I'm eating my dinner.
Okay, no problem.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hey, how are you?
Okay. Hey, Michael.
You guys can feel free to chat, you know? Not you, Jane.
Hello, Michael.
Hi.
Everybody
Hi.
else. Oh, Mike Rosenthal, Avi, Suzanne. Whoa.
What is that?
Hello. I heard that it was the month of Adar, so I thought I would dress for Adar. Wait, I need my glasses. Hold on a sec. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, really, I am so into this Purim thing, so excited. And hopefully you'll be with us next week, Tuesday night, Erev Purim. And then actually Purim night, Wednesday night, I hope you'll be with us. I think I'm going to take this off. And, you know, 6 o'clock pizza, 6:30.
Rabbi Merow. Does this look familiar?
Yeah, really
Oh.
nice. Really nice. I just took mine off.
Hold on a second.
But what I'm most excited about is that we're having this great party afterwards. It's going to be outside for those of you who want to be outside. So who can't, like, thank you, Ellen, for dressing up. For those of you who feel like you can't be outside, can't be inside and celebrate, so we'll have outside. And then I have procured an area at a very fine establishment called the Ivy, Princeton's dive bar across the street from where I live. And there will be an area, and the first round's on me. So I hope people will come to the after party. Yeah. And actually, I will tell you that while booking the Ivy, my dog sat at the bar and had a drink. No joke. She did. Okay. So I am ready and so happy that you're here. Some of you watched this on video. I also want to say that today the Jewish Center laid to rest a dedicated member, Honey Rosenberg. And so I would say that we will dedicate our learning tonight, Lizichra, to her memory. Such a wonderful, wonderful woman who worked in the city till into her 70s and kept working right up until the pandemic, into her 90s, I believe. So we'll keep her in mind as we learn Torah tonight. I think most of you know each other. I think you don't know Emily Wright. Emily Wright is from my former life, and she is a dear friend of mine. So she wants to be on as well. So we're happy that you're here. Emily, we can't wait to welcome you here in Princeton or wherever Jerry.
Hopefully soon. I would love to come.
Yes. And a lot of these people are shul people in the morning as well, so you'll see them. So I have a very different kind of text this week, and I brought 2 texts. Just in case we finish one, I wanted to bring something that was a little bit Purim-like. So how about I share the text right after we do last so pity for Torah. So this is a blessing that we can say together, pause for a moment and thank God for allowing us to la'asok, be busy with, be involved with asuk, busy, asuka, divrei Torah, with actions and words and deeds of Torah. So join with me. The beginning part, most of you know. Baruch, and you can unmute if you want. Baruch atah Adonai, Tichanu b'mitzvotav,
Torah.
Amen. So by the way, before we continue, does anyone have anything that they thought about last week after this class, or anything about that particular piece of Talmud? If you want to say no, that's fine before we move on. I really hope this is decaf. If not, Suzanne, I'll call you at 2 a.m.
Hmm.
No? Anyone? So do you remember that the text was about walking in God's ways, and what does it mean to actually walk in God's ways? And it talked about what are attributes of God and how we sort of follow those. All right, we're gonna try a different text. And I want to tell you that I've cheated on this class. Meaning I have permission, but I'm actually following the syllabus, an actual syllabus of Introduction to Talmud class at the Hebrew University, taught by Professor Dr. Reish. Yeah. So hold on one second. Want to show you.
So as Rabbi's getting what she needs, I just want to let you guys know, if you hadn't seen, that I also put the I put the handout again into the chat in case that's an easier way for you guys to grab it.
In the early 90s, I got to study in Jerusalem at the Machon Schechter Institute, which is the Conservative Masorti Institute for Torah Study. The best job that anyone can get when you're in Israel and young is to be Dr. Rabbi Pesach Schindler's TA at Hebrew University, teaching assistant. And I walked in on the right day and had the right recommendations. So I got to be Pesach Schindler's TA. This is what his syllabi looked like in his books. Then there was no Sefaria. It was all crazy small Xerox pages. But for an entire year, I got to TA his intro, intermediate, and advanced introduction to Talmud classes. And since then, I try to use sugyot, or sugyot. We learned the word sugya last week. What does sugya mean? By the way, Neil and Eleni are at another Talmud thing tonight. They'll be back next week. They let me know. There are a few other people, but anyone remember what sugya is? A sugya is a complete thought. It's a piece of text. It's not 1 page or 2 pages. It's however long the rabbis make their argument. So this guy, Pesach Schindler, was, chair of the Talmud department at Hebrew University and a pretty good decisor of what should be in intro classes. And so I always do my intro classes with ideas from his class when I was his TA many now. So it feels like centuries ago, but decades ago. One of the things he had taught to his TAs is that a lot of Talmud is boring. I'll tell you that. Or a lot of Talmud is about like getting the intricacies of a logical discussion that's not done in a very logical way in an understandable order. So what he always says is when you first study Talmud with people, make sure you study big ideas. So last week, the big idea, we didn't really discuss it that much because we were talking about the Talmud, is how do you follow in God's ways? So before we jump into this text, we didn't use it yet to jump off and say, how do you follow in God's ways? The Talmud doesn't want us to just read it. It wants us to also grapple with it. So if I could, as our starting off point before we walk into a different Masechet, a different piece of Talmud, how would you say today you can discern what God's ways are? And by the way, if you have the right answer, I wouldn't know because I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is for this. We're going to come up with the right answer. How do you walk in God's ways? Remember last week it was clothe the naked, It wasn't feed the hungry. It was clothe the naked and bury the dead and deal with people who are vulnerable at their time of vulnerability.
Feed the hungry.
I mean, maybe for today, it wasn't in last week's sugya, in last week's part. So, but today, walking in God's ways, feed the hungry.
You follow the 13 attributes in the Torah.
So maybe we follow what those 13 attributes that we say on the holidays. Anyone else have ideas?
I'd say that you basically tried to imitate all the stuff on God's good side before God gets angry.
Oh my gosh, Michelle, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I feel like we always have discussions about how do you imitate God, and what if the way to imitate God is being like God in the Noah story? Right? What happens there?
Yeah.
God kind of gives up on us and humanity is destroyed and then rebuilt. But it's an interesting question. So I want you to understand that the Talmud, learning Talmud at the beginning is learning how to learn, but there are great and large ideas. And the piece of text that I brought you last week is that large idea of that's our whole life discussion. How do you follow in God's ways? Michelle said, well, maybe we look for, the when God does good in the Torah. And Jane said, maybe it's the 13 attributes. Anyone else have it? I mean, I kind of think like how to be godly. So I'm not a parent, but I always think about like parents that create children. That feels pretty godly to me. Parents that create. And any of you are a grandparent watching your children become parents, that feels like something pretty godly. Watching your children go from being children to parents. That feels godly. It feels godly to me, like to walk in God's ways. If you're a scientist working down the street and figuring out how to cure some big bad disease, that feels, that generative process of like science feels pretty godly to me. So let's keep in our mind that it's that the argument is important in the Talmud, but the meta idea, I hate that Facebook stole that word, but that the meta idea of how do you walk in God's ways? Okay, before we go on, anyone have any comments, criticisms, questions?
Avi Paradise, you did?
Avi and then Ellen, and then we'll start.
I'm wondering about if a modern interpretation is trying to understand God not anthropomorphically, so without the 13 attributes, then maybe it's something about Shema. Maybe it's something about opening and listening and trying to sense or hear God's voice, the still quiet voice, and somehow being tuned into something beyond ourselves to understand what is godly.
Great, and I want to unpack a little bit what you said. So the text I'm bringing tonight is actually a little bit on anthropomorphism, and that's why I put this one after last week. And that's why I want to have this conversation. So anthropomorphism is, of course, this idea that like I am limited because I am human, so I can only describe God in the words I have, all of us. So we end up calling God by human body parts, right? But God's not a body. God doesn't inhabit a body, we think, or at least Rambam Maimonides thinks that. So there's no he or she. I often will talk to some Orthodox friends about, hey, could you not call God he? And they think it's my feminist side, but it's actually my religious side of saying God is not a he or she. God doesn't have, or maybe God has all those attributes. So I think that is interesting for us to think about how we look at what God does in the world as opposed to how God presents in any kind of form. Yeah, Avi, we're having a conversation. Let's go, and then Ellen will go back.
Okay, so part of that, what's interesting for me in that sense is this idea that we don't have the language, And so, you know, I've been in conversations that say we don't have, that language itself limits us and we can't understand what divinity is with language. It just is beyond us. But that maybe there are other kinds of language that allow us to connect or understand in some way. And that in effect, music is one such language maybe. That maybe the power of music is that we can break out of the limitations of our vocabulary, of the limits that language imposes on our conception of what is divine, and that music allows us to connect and understand something that we can't understand with our rational linguistic minds. And that's part of the power of music and religion. And that even more so then, that when we finish singing, if we actually finish singing and we stop and we actually allow to just feel that energy of the music in the silence, that maybe then the silence is even more powerful for us to understand and comprehend something about what is divine.
Beautiful. Amen. I love it. I love it. I also think that if you heard Eleni's talk on the Great Mind Salon, that art for some people takes that role, that they're the paintings or the clay that they're using become something, and that there's some sort of divinity within that artistic process. But you know, recently I was talking to some scientists. Who are scientists on this tonight? You want to say, yeah, and that within that scientific process of creativity, of either math or whatever you're working on, there's also some sense of divinity. I've heard from some of you who are scientists. Does that? But let's go, Ellen, and then you can answer my question, and then we'll go.
So something that I didn't get a chance to mention last week, but came to mind to me when we were talking about God being fiery and not to try to reach God, kind of made me think of things I've learned, although I haven't studied very much, about the Zohar, that you're supposed to peel away the layers to try to reach God, but you're never going to be God. And you know, I kept going back to that text that I've read in the Zohar, that as hard as we try, you never can try to achieve the equality of God. You should always try to be like God, but never be God.
Well, absolutely. To be a layer, a level, a layer, an onion peel away, right?
Right.
My teacher, some of you knew him, Dr. Rabbi Neil Gilman of blessed memory. Any of you studied his stuff? And his greatest, I think, book is about this intro to Jewish theology. And he talks about it. He talked about seeing divinity in the rings of an onion when you cut an onion all the way down. Really that deeply in nature, seeing those senses of divinity. Okay, I'm going to go on unless anyone else has a comment, and I'm going to share screen if I have learned how. Jerry Kaufman, are you in Jerusalem? Because that's what it looks like.
You're close. That's Neve Tzedek
Okay.
in Tel Aviv, but I'm not there. That's the background. That's my daughter lived in an apartment there, and that's looking out from her apartment.
Beautiful,
But
beautiful.
I just wanted to ask, God's way, or in God's way, what may I ask what that is in Hebrew, because I cannot think of it, and I can't get a context for what that might mean in English. Or it's kind of, say that again.
I don't know the text in front of me. Let me get the text, but it's Bidrachav.
Okay.
Did we send you the text? I think we sent you the text.
Yes, I got it. Oh, I just don't remember that being, you mean today's text?
No,
Oh,
no,
the other
last
day?
week's.
Oh,
I do have it, but I didn't realize.
Lahalech achar midotav shel hakadosh baruch hu.
Okay. Midotav would be his,
No, the verse that they're quoting is Acharei Hashem Elokechem Telechu. And how do you walk in God's ways? Telechu.
okay, well, all right, that's one way
And
to translate it.
they answer it. Well, wait, how else would you translate Telechu?
Acharei,
Hashem Elokechem Telechu.
To follow him,
Okay.
to go, well, to
So
follow
that's
him.
the conversation that the rabbis had last week, that the rabbis had in the sugya last week, that they think it is going after is actually not following, but doing what God does.
I
How do you
understand.
follow God?
I just think that I take it a little more simply than everybody else. In the way when they wrote it, I think they were thinking not to emulate God, because I don't think rabbis want you to do that. I think they wanted you to walk in the ways that God prescribed for you.
No, they do want you. That's exactly the sugya from last week. The sugya from last week is, in order to walk in God's ways, you should emulate God by, who remembers the three things from last week's sugya? Clothing the naked.
Clothing the naked.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Burying the dead. Visiting the sick.
Okay, I missed that.
So what the rabbis do, Jerry, is they take a simple verse and they complicate it. My favorite thing, they complicate the narrative. Nothing is ever simple. Okay, new topic. We are, oh, Emily, I see you writing on this, it looks like. I don't know how that is happening, but anyway, do you all see that green?
Yes.
Okay, we'll try to not do that. I don't know how that's being done. So here are some terms. I should have put them in italics. I did not. You'll forgive me. So El is one of God's names. Tell me what you know about that name of God. Anyone can jump in. These are words that are going to be in our text tonight. What do you know about God who is called El?
Well, I know something about it.
Yeah, jump in. This is all a sharing class.
This may be totally irrelevant, but I once saw a Arabic transliteration of the Haggadah, and the word God in the Haggadah transliteration from Arabic was spelled Aleph Lamed Lamed Hey, Allah. It's basically the exact same word in Hebrew and in Arabic.
That's a lovely, I wasn't thinking you would bring that out, but it is true and firm, stable and enduring, as it said in that old Silverman prayer book, and beautiful. That's beautiful. So when we think about the names that we most use for God in a bracha, what's the other one? It's that 4-letter name. Yod He Vav He, right? Which we pronounce Adonai, or Abba even used to pronounce Yahweh, right? So difference between El and Adonai, El and Yod He Vav He. So anyone? So El is the stern God. El is the God of the laws. God more of law. And Adonai is the compassionate God. That's generally how the rabbis break it down. So it's always curious to me when they use El and when they use Adonai. Okay, Gadol, mighty one. So it actually should be in, right? Because they're talking about God as the Gadol, the mighty one. Norah, this is an important word. Norah, also related to the word yirah. Norah means like awe. My favorite high holiday piyut, my favorite high holiday poem at the end of Yom Kippur, El Norah, God who is awe-filled and awe-inspiring. And then this is a Talmud word that is just in this next text that we're going to study. I love this word, so I wanted to at least teach you this word, which is Adaraba. This is in Aramaic, and it means on the contrary. So if someone is having a conversation with you and you really think that they are absolutely backwards, you can look at them and say Adaraba. It's actually the opposite, Adaraba. Okay, yeah, anyone want to jump in? Okay, the guys that we're meeting tonight, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, 200 of Israel, just on the cusp of is he a Tana or an Amora? Is he an early rabbi or Is he an early Mishnaic rabbi, a late Talmudic rabbi? You know, it could go either way. And then the next two are prophets. Jeremiah was the bullfrog. Jeremiah and Daniel, they're about 100 years apart, but old. So these are the questions. Let me talk to you for a second about what we're doing in a second. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to read questions. I'm going to read the text, and then we're going to break up into study groups. You do not need to have any experience. All you got to do is read through together with the people in your breakout group, try to answer some of the questions, or try to come up with your own. Does that seem okay? Anyone have questions, comments, dissension? Did you all do a shtick talk? Okay. Let me do share again. Where's that share thing? Okay, these are the questions. So could someone read them so I don't have to keep reading? Someone volunteer to read questions?
I'll read
What is-
them. What is Rav Yehoshua ben Levi's question?
So he's
What-
going to ask something at the beginning. He's going to talk about something. You have to figure out what his question is.
You want to read all of them?
Yeah, we're going to just reading them through.
Okay, what does his first answer mean? For he resorted the crown mean?
Restored.
Oh, restored. How might you know that the Gemara is not completely happy with his first answer?
Okay, Gemara, again, as a reminder, is what we call the Talmud. It's the second part. It's Mishnah is the early part. Talmud is what the Gemara is the second part, the later part that was composed later from 200 to 500 or 550.
What does Moshe say? See the Hebrew.
Yeah, because I think you'll know the Hebrew. Okay.
Are the rabbis okay with Moshe's answer? Why bring Jeremiah next? What does he add? Are the rabbis happy with Jeremiah and Moshe? How does the phrase "on the contrary" work? According to our text, what makes God mighty?
Okay, and I'll say something about the Adaraba, on the contrary. It's a pretty biting thing to say. It's strong language in rabbinic conversation. And then the last one is, what can this sugya, this piece of Torah, teach us about truth, ourselves, and God? Also, I just want to remind people in Pirkei Avot, in a different Mishnah, we learn who is mighty, one who suppresses his or her anger. So you may not agree with that, right? You may say that is not like psychologically so good, but in the mind of the rabbis, the one who is mighty, Esahu Gibor, is one who is able to suppress their anger. So we're going to take now about 10 or 12 minutes or so, maybe 12 minutes, and break into groups. And here the thing is, I did put it with vowels. So I'm going to read it. You're going to read it together, but we're asking why those sages were called members of the Great Assembly. So the Great Assembly was the group of rabbis that existed during the time of the temple and sort of later maybe in the rabbi's imagination, and they made all of the rulings, 70 elders. Does anyone have any questions? We're going to break into groups, and you can use those questions or you can use your own questions, and the text is pretty short. It starts right here. You see and then it just goes down to here. Don't do the one getting ready for Purim. So about 10 or 12 minutes or so, we'll break out into groups. Suzanne, don't put me in a group. I'll go from group to group.
Right, you can just float.
Yeah.
You are in a group, but you can say hello to your people and then move on.
Great.
Avi, you're not, there you I see you skipped out. You're muted, darling.
I'm reading the text myself. I needed to read it myself again.
Cool.
Ata Daniel Amar Nachrichim Nishtabdim and Ayeg Burata. Atu Inhu Va'amru Adaraba Zohi Kurat Gurato Shekoveshet Yitzra. I'm trying to, like, the Hebrew is much easier for me to read, which is a problem.
Oh,
No, there are too many words in the English.
that's understandable.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the Hebrew to find where the words are.
I don't understand any of it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, that's okay.
I know, I'm fine with that. It would be great to have a full class talking about
We will.
the first thing you talked about with, where do you find God? Where do you think,
Yeah.
That's one of the things I really like about this congregation and its leadership as, I guess we've chosen the leaders that feel the same way, is that you can find God. You're okay if you find God wherever you find God. Some congregations might not feel that way.
Okay, I just have to be quiet for one. I have to be quiet for a second. I got to read this because I'm having trouble finding something. Amar Nochrim Mishta'abdim Babinyan. Ayek Vorte. How much time do we have left?
4 minutes.
All right, I'm going online to find something.
Okay. I can always change
Yeah,
it.
no, I'm on here. I just have to find something. Whew, 69B. Let's see.
I can keep them open longer.
Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, let's bring everyone back.
Okay. They'll be back in 60 seconds. Mhm.
Okay.
They'll be back in 60 seconds.
Okay. You're in 2 places. It's so interesting.
The reason I have the laptop is because my desktop, as you see now, just froze and it was dying. And I don't know why. So. And there it goes. I don't know why they're not coming back.
I don't know what happened. It actually says there's only 2 participants in the entire Zoom.
All right.
Oh, now it says they will close in 55 seconds.
They'll be back in 5 seconds.
Hmm.
How are your discussions?
This is a harder text, yeah? Right, anyone?
Challenging. It's truly
Yes, I found it
challenging.
really hard.
Yeah.
So let's start it.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go through it, anyone have any general comments to make?
I wanted to get a little bit of clarification on a couple of things.
Yeah,
Okay.
but first,
First of all-
I just want to ask first for anyone, if you have general things, before we do questions, general comments, then questions. But okay, Jerry, clarifications.
Okay, when we're talking about Moshe, we're talking about Moses, right?
Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our
Okay.
teacher. We're
Right.
talking about the Daniel, Jeremiah, we're talking about the prophets, as if they're having a conversation with each other almost. But yeah, that's what we're talking
And
about.
when we talk about the sages that restore the crown, we're not talking about Daniel and Jeremiah, right?
We are actually, we are.
We are?
Seemingly,
We are. That is what makes it also a difficult text. Yeah, it is. Well, Jeremiah and Daniel omitted things in how they called God. So yeah, we're re-embodying what, yeah, they shouldn't be sages, but that's what they're called here. Yeah.
But I thought the sages were the rabbis commenting on Jeremiah and Daniel, like Rabbi Ellis.
Yes, but they are doing some word plays here and calling the guys who are actually prophets sages. But yeah.
Okay, so I would like to comment on this then. So the way I understand it is that Jeremiah and Daniel omitted words that they felt were not honest in the way of the way that God's, his glory, his crown was not present in their times. And so they refrained from using those descriptive words that Moses did use. And that would seem to go counter to restoring his glory. That's what I'm confused about.
Okay, we'll go through it. My one thing is that I'm not let's try to get away from God as his and God as just God, non-gendered, as a point of theology of how we believe God to not be gendered. But yes, that's why this is a troubling text. Okay, who has other just plain comments about what was said?
Well, I thought in general it was interesting because it kind of addressed Michelle's point about God having evil. Sometimes it seems to be evil, and it's saying as long as you're truthful about it, you can omit the description of God that includes him being evil or violent. And also I wanted to say in the Torah, remember when God sticks Moses in the crack in the rock?
Yeah.
And I thought obviously you remember, the point is that we can only see little snippets of God, and we can't really know what God is, who God is. And I like that Rabbi Elazar said, as long as you're honest, it's okay to reject parts of God that you see that you don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me that is so critical, that I feel like this text is about how we describe things in the world and how we value or don't value truth. How we value truth, right? I'm not as concerned with the actual argument. I'm concerned with the meta idea here and that end piece about truth. But let's anyone have other comments? Because then we're gonna just read together.
Well, I have to say, I find the comments being Jeremiah and Daniel taking certain attributes away from their descriptions is also the way that people see things differently. Everybody's perception is different.
Right. So what I hear you saying is that they sort of didn't see God in those ways, and so they couldn't say it.
Right.
Someone, you know how like we all describe people differently because we only see one aspect of them. someone thinks someone is a terrible person, but another person only sees their good stuff. So magnify that by something that's much larger. And yeah. Anyone want to comment on what anyone has said before we read through a little?
I'm curious, I'm thinking about much later Piyut, and you read the Piyutim of the people in the Middle Ages, and they're
Poetry, right? Yeah.
you know, and they're struggling with the same issue. Why are we God's people, and why are we in exile? And they feel in a way that I don't think that we feel in the same way. That the galut, and that we're here. We are. We're trying to do God's work. We're trying to do what God wants us to do, and yet we're in exile, and we're oppressed, and we have pogroms, and we have all these things. And it's you know, when you read through the Middle Ages, and they can't understand how this can be. It's similar.
I think it's very similar to our time, to when we have conversations. I mean, if you, Ellen teaches in our Hebrew high school, and we have kids coming and talking about anti-Semitism, and they're not old enough and they're naive enough to just not get it. And so they are so upset by it, because what I don't understand, the rest of us are jaded because we just know that, oh, well, people hate us or anti-Semitism happens. Yeah, this is kind of one of those enduring questions. I mean, I feel like for me, the thing that gets brought up in this text the most is this idea of truth, and how subjective truth can be by, this is the thing that Emily was saying, by who is seeing the other person and who is seeing the reality. Yeah, it does feel like, look, these are prophets that knew destruction. This is like, they knew the first destructions of our people. So yeah, I'm going to share. By the way, I really want you to all come to Shul this week. I know I say that every week, but it's an amazing bat mitzvah this week. Not because of the bat mitzvah girl, but because of her parents, because they were Soviets.
Oh,
They were Russians. They are Russians. And a couple weeks ago, you saw the mom convert at Shul and get her Hebrew name.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you were in Shul, so the bat mitzvah of the child is this weekend. As they wanted to talk about, you know, their homeland, what was going on there. Pretty interesting. I'm going to share. I'm also going to do something to make this text a little easier right now. I'm going to take the Hebrew out. You have it. I already sent it to you. I'm going to make it a little bigger. Okay.
You know, the Hebrew came out backwards, like on yours too, I think.
Really?
Yes, so like I think I have to send it out as a PDF so it stays. I can see it on my cell phone, but correctly, but not what I printed out backwards.
All right, I just wanted to make it bigger. All right. So remember, when we're reading this text, everything that's in bold is what's in the Gemara, in the Talmud. Everything else is commentary that the translator put in. The reason why I'm showing you this is that I want you to be able to pick up a page of Talmud yourself someday and not need me, and be able to study with each other. But know that if you're using it from Sparia, at least they tell you what's commentary. If you use Sansino translation or Steinsaltz translation, they don't necessarily tell you which is actually from the Hebrew or the Aramaic text, and which is just commentary. So I do like that you get the commentary here, but you have to weed it out a little. So if I was just reading this, it would say, Rav Matana leans to, meaning he agrees with, what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says. That's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says. So someone read the question.
Why are the sages of those generations called the members of the Great Assembly?
Okay, so that's the question. But if you were reading this in the Hebrew, you would just get why are called the members of the Great Assembly. And you'd have to sort of figure out, I don't really understand. That's not a whole sentence, but that's actually the sentence that's written there. And so you have to sort of figure out, well, why is it written like that? So in the Hebrew, it's Lama, for those who speak Hebrew, Nikra Sheman Anshe Knesset Hagadolah. Why is the name of that called the Knesset Hagadolah? Okay. By the way, why is that? Is that a weird question to anyone? I mean, it's almost like saying, why is the Supreme Court called the Supreme Court? Because that's what it's called. Because it's the highest court. Why is the Knesset Hagadolah called that? It's
Why are they honored with that title?
the Knesset Hagadolah. They're the highest, well, Supreme Court. They're the highest court. Okay, so they returned the, let's hear the answer.
The crown. Oh, it is because they returned the crown. Am I supposed to be reading this?
Yeah, that's great.
It is because they returned the crown of the Holy One, blessed be God, to its former glory.
So here's the question. Do you believe that answer? Do you think that's,
Aren't they have to kind of justify their position, right? They're just a few like guys studying. I mean, you know, probably at that point when they wrote it, they weren't necessarily revered by everybody. They had disciples, but so that they
Right,
had,
so
they had
right, so let's say they're writing this somewhere between the year 300 and 500 of the Common Era, right? When the last time that Knesset Hagadolah, that great assembly met, was around right before the year 70 of the Common Era, right?
Okay.
So why are they talking about this? Literally, it could be 400 years since that great assembly sat. So for them, this is all a little bit historical fiction to them. They didn't really know what was happening, nor did they know why it was called the Great Assembly. If someone asked you, why was it called the Great Assembly? What might you say? You're not thinking about this text.
Well, if no one else is going to speak up, I don't want to be the big talker here, but I was theorizing in our group that maybe they're referencing the people who, when the Gentiles were wreaking havoc in the temple, these people went and turned from sacrifice and worship in the temple to scholarship. You know, like, are they referring maybe to the people that went to Yavna, etc., and were able to restore God's crown by finding another way to honor his?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and it would fit in like with when we talked about Pirkei Avot a couple of weeks ago, that, well, they had to sort of justify, and that would work with what Michelle was saying as well. Maybe they had to justify that they are the next generation after the Great Assembly.
So what was the context of this? How did the Great Assembly come up suddenly out of the blue?
Right. Yeah. So I can read it to you, but I think that the reason I wanted to bring it wasn't because of that. I wanted to really bring it because of this discussion of truth. So if I could parking lot it till next time, or I could read it to you now if you want.
That's okay.
Yeah, because
it feels like if you were just being prosaic, you'd think that they're like in any leadership structure, you would have all kinds of, you know, you'd have multiple gatherings. You'd have the small courts at the local levels, and just like you said, the Supreme Court. So you have Knesset, you'd have the Knesset Haktana, and you've got all these other intermediate ones, and finally you have the Knesset Agdolah, where they can actually make rulings and
the great court.
Yeah, you know, I would think it was just as simple as that, and to make a whole thing because of one word, if it's all a play on Gadol and making this the connection between Gdolah and Gadol in the description of God, that's part of the thing that I really have trouble with. That's in the Talmud.
Yeah, actually, I said it feels like a couple minutes ago, the Gemara takes simple concepts and makes them more confusing. No, Really, they take something that could be quite simple and they're doing it right here. Why is the Knesset Hagadolah, the Great Assembly in Jerusalem, called the Great Assembly? And we could say, it's called the Great Assembly because that's who was the leading group of people that met to give their advice. But no, they have this whole midrash teaching something else because they want to teach the last line that I brought you. This is all, they knew it was called the Great Assembly because that's who met and made the rulings. This is fiction. This is beautiful homiletics. This is all so they can get to that last verse.
The last verse.
Yeah, let's get there. I'm going to share because I wanted to get to the Purim thing too for a second. Obviously, I'm all about Purim. Okay, so I'm going to read a little. Ooh, I don't want him to come in. So the sages are called this because they returned the crown of glory. Moses came and said in prayer, Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, the great, the mighty, the awesome God, Hanorah. And then Jeremiah came and said, no, the Nochrim, those who are helping with Nebuchadnezzar. We're carousing in the sanctuary. Where is God's awesomeness? And because of that, Jeremiah wasn't gonna say awesome, no Ra in his prayer. The great God, the mighty God is God's name. But I'm not gonna say awesome when non-Jews are like coming out and messing up our temple. Heretics are messing up our temple. So now you have Daniel come in. I mean, this isn't like, this conversation didn't take place except in the minds of these rabbis writing this text in the 4th or 5th century, the Common Era, about something that happened
100 years ago.
No, hundreds of years ago, right? When did Daniel and Jeremiah live?
800 or 900 years prior.
Exactly. So they're imagining this conversation about a body that didn't exist when they were having their conversation. The Great Assembly didn't exist when Jeremiah and Daniel were there. So this is like one of the reasons I want to show you this piece this is a great piece of Gemara to show you that the Talmud is having a conversation across generations and they don't know they're having the conversation, the people involved in it. Moses is one of the players in it. And Moses's words are pitted against Daniel's or pitted against Jeremiah's about something that occurs, I mean, for Moses, 1,000 years after he lived.
More than that.
Yeah, right.
100.
After he lived. This is how the Talmud is designed. This is how it's put together. This is what's so interesting about it is you have to sort of look at it with the eyes of, oh, they're making up this conversation between Moses, who lived a long, long time ago, and then Jeremiah and Daniel, who also lived a long time ago, but hundreds of years after Moses. And they're commenting on something that happened in the Common Era even, or a couple hundred years before. So their point is not to really actually talk about the reality. They have this cross-generational made up fake conversation to teach us something.
Okay.
So let's get to what they teach us. What, did you want to jump in, Jerry?
Believe it or not, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I think this is like, I'm imagining a rabbi teaching this and his thumb just going in a huge arc. And what he's doing is he's using that word Adaraba.
Yeah.
And this is just a theory of mine. I don't know. I'm guessing. Adaraba. On the contrary, by them saying they don't want to use those words because they're not seeing those qualities, they're being honest. And that high value of their honesty, like on the contrary, by their honesty, they are exhibiting the great wisdom, and they are restoring God's crown or God's glory by doing that.
Yeah.
Am I way off base, or is that the
No,
whole?
no, you are not. They are this. Let me get to the end thing where the Gemara asks, and the rabbis So they're calling it Jeremiah and Daniel. That's what's confusing here. How could they do this in uprooted ordinance issued by Moses? The ordinance is how you say God's name, right? The greatest teacher instituted the mention of these attributes in prayer. And this is the important part of the whole thing. Let me bold it all for you. Rabbi Elazar said they did so because they knew of the Holy One, blessed be God, that God is truthful and hates a lie. That's it. This whole thing is made up for that verse. This conversation is made up so that we can all say God values truth. I wanted you to see how the Talmud is constructed. This is not a real conversation. Jeremiah, Daniel, and Moses all lived hundreds and hundreds of years before the Great Assembly. So the rabbis, hundreds of years later, take something that Moses said, and they say, oh, but you know what? Daniel and Jeremiah say it in a different way. And they use this as a tool to teach one message. What's the one message?
That you don't have to lie about God, that God wants the truth.
Or anything. Or anything. That whole constructed argument and discussion, I got you next in 1 second, Bible Carmichael, and it's all about creating a conversation that never actually existed in real life, but between characters that live. These are all characters in the imagination of the rabbis, because Jeremiah and Daniel and Queen Esther and everyone, they're all in their head. And so they want to teach about truth, so they make this conversation up so that we will all understand that last line. Rabbi Elazar says, the truth matters. You don't restore God's crown by lying. Okay, Michael Golden, go ahead.
So some years back, there was one of the teachers from JTS that was giving a seminar at the Jewish Center. And we were looking at a part in the Amidah where it was saying, you know, the compassionate God. And whoever it was saying that there have been times in his life when he was angry at God and he couldn't read that particular line because he didn't feel it. And only when the anger subsided or he went on was he able to read that again. So the same discussion that these rabbis were having is really something we do today. I mean, think how many discussions there were amongst rabbis regarding the Holocaust. Where was God during the Holocaust? So I think that the discussion that they brought up we're doing today, and it's very pertinent.
I hope, and what I really hope, Michael, is that if you don't know what the Hebrew means when you're in a prayer service, read it in English, because it's actually important. It's not a song session. And there are two different ways to do prayer. There's the prayerful feeling that the music gives us, but that is only to inspire us to look at those words. And those words are only to inspire us to look at our heart. And so I agree wholeheartedly that there are definitely words in the Amidah that I don't say on some days. But in order to be able to do that, I have to know what the words mean. So I'll tell you this little story. I hate that we're taping this, but we're taping it. I said Mourner's Kaddish for 11 months for my beloved brother. And he would have hated that I said Kaddish. He would have wanted me to go have a beer instead in his honor. That would have been his thing. And then I stopped, and less than 2 months later, I started saying Kaddish for my dad. And I liked saying Kaddish. It was fine. It was good. There wasn't anything bad for me. But there was a line in the Amidah that I couldn't say for 2 years. Rofei Cholim. 2 people that died of great sickness. I can say it now, but I couldn't say it then. Mechayei HaMeitim, God who resurrects souls. I said it, but I prayed it extra hard. So Yeah, I do think that the conversation here should make us think about the conversation in our own davening life, our own prayer life. Or, which by the way, Avi Paradise leads davening on the high holidays. The most complicated theological davening that we have is those medieval prayer poems that he's talking about on the high holidays. I know that it is every cantor's dream and most congregants' dream to hear the medieval poem Unatana Tokef. Right? Who shall live and who shall die this year? But Shuva, Tefillah, and Staka, they make it all seem a little bit better. But do they? And maybe they do now because I lead a nice life, but I'm sure they wouldn't have. How did people in the Shoah say that? I wonder if they did. Or which of them did. Anyway, that last line is just so important. I believe that this text is here not to be burdened by, well, this rabbi said it one way, this prophet said it one way, and this prophet said it. It's all about that end line to say, Rabbi Elazar says, truth over everything else.
You know what's hard about that for me though, is that it's one way of looking at the truth, but it's it's a bitter truth. They're the ones who are feeling it in their heart and saying, how can you be so mighty if we're being oppressed? But that's not what the prayer book says. Like when we read the prayer books, it says, right? It's because of our sins that we were exiled. It's our own fault. That's what the traditional liturgy says.
And I'm saying that the traditional liturgy is problematic. Yeah. But this feels like Michael said, this feels a little bit more honest. And it might feel a little bit more honest if you're in the middle of look, for some people, if you're in the middle of a plague, in the middle of a crusade in the 1000s or 1100s, and the Holy Roman Empire is riding with crosses across Europe to go conquer Jerusalem, it might make you feel better to say, well, we did something bad about ourselves. We did something bad. It's because of us. But probably it might be more truthful to say, where's God helping us? Why are we suffering like this?
I don't disagree with you, but it's interesting that these early rabbis then saw it that way, and that's not the way that the later rabbis went.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah.
The earlier, yeah.
Because you gave us that reference to Deuteronomy, and we look in our group, we went and looked that up, and the sentence before that is super interesting, right? But it talks about. Let me read that. It says, "Umaltem et orlat levavchem ve'orpechem lo takshu od."
So translate for everyone else. Mohel.
So they use umaltem et orlat, which is the same language we use for circumcision, which takes us into the people.
Circumcise my heart.
Circumcise your heart. So they translate it as cut away the thickening about your hearts. Is there a thickening around your hearts, and if there is it some kind of metaphor? Is that what makes us Jewish, by circumcising our hearts? And they weren't. It would be easy for them to have gone to this sentence and say it's because we didn't do this to our hearts, and because we were a stiff-necked people. It would have been easy for them to say that, and that's why God didn't. That's why God did not show His might. They could have said that.
Right, but so they do say it a lot, as you are saying. They do say all over, the rabbis do say it's because of our own failings, but here they're not saying that. Here they're kind of using Daniel and Jeremiah to be like, maybe there are other reasons. And look, what it also shows us is that the rabbis weren't monolithic in their view of how they saw tradition. I'm going to go on because we're going to end really soon, and I want to share one more thing with you. This is from Masachet Megillah, which is all about Esther and Purim and Mordechai and that evil guy whose name we don't mention. I'm gonna read this. Amarava Metive Inche Livisume Bipuria Ad Diloyada Bain Arur Haman Levaruch Mordechai. Rava, who is a great Amora, Rava, who is the rabbi in the Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, a person is obligated to become intoxicated. And it says, they added with wine, but I don't think that's true. Intoxicated with whoever you're going to become drunk with on Purim until she or he does not know how to tell the difference between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai. This is probably something you've heard of, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of odd that we're told to get drunk. But Rabba and Rabbi Zera prepared a Purim feast with each other. They became intoxicated. Rabba got up and slaughtered Rabbi Zera. By the way, do you think this is true?
No.
No, it's a story. Right, good. Good, you're there. The next day, he became sober and realized what he's done. Rabba asked God for mercy. Or maybe it's really, I'll ask for mercy. We think it's from God. And God revived him. The next year, Rabba said to Rabbi Zera, let the master come to my house and we'll prepare a Purim feast with each other. And he said to him, miracles do not happen each and every hour.
Wait, who said that? The guy who got murdered?
Yeah.
What's it trying to teach?
Murderer.
I think he's trying to teach, don't wait for miracles because you may not see them.
Okay, you may not see them. First of all, they're kind of making a poke at, like, I wanted you to see that, like, the rabbis are kind of poke fun at each other and poke fun at themselves. They're clearly poking fun at themselves here. Oh my God, I got so drunk that I killed my colleague. And then God resurrected him the next day. Next year, we're going to try it again. It's a farce. And sometimes it's, we think about like, oh, Talmud, it's so sacred, but it is also the recordings of the conversations in the Beit Midrash, in the study hall. And that one I find to be fun and comical and puts you in the Purim mood and reminds us that Nebuch, the earlier text, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in our history. I mean, I was given this sermon about Ukraine 2 weeks ago, and I realized, like, it's 1,000 years of Jewish history in Ukraine, and most of it is terrible.
Not according to Fishman.
What? Wait, did Steve say something?
Yes.
David Fishman.
Dr. Fishman, my professor.
Dr. Fishman, yes. He said it was not all terrible. That in fact, actually, it was probably better than some places to the east.
Yeah.
And his proof text there was, you can't even run for parliament in Poland if you're Jewish, without people saying, he's Jewish, he can't run. Whereas the president of Ukraine is now Jewish, so.
Did you take his class this week at the seminary?
Well, we were listening to it last night.
No, we were listening to the lecture he gave about Ukraine
Yeah.
last week.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I wish I could hear that. I took one class with him on the history of Vilna. It's a good class, but a long time ago. Yeah, look, he's right. It's not as bad as some other places. Like, what am I going to say about Camden? It's like, it's not, yes, it's not a good place for the Jews. Now it's okay. Right now there's a lot of Jews, but Jewish histories had hard times there. We've all had hard times, which is why I love that in the time of the Talmud, they put some humor in there. That's a funny story. We got so drunk that we murdered each other. I murdered the other guy who I was having my Purim pseudo with. That's a joke. No one should murder. Yeah.
It's the idea that all Jews of all generations were at Sinai. Is that rabbinical?
Yeah.
Because that's consistent with the idea that they see all the generations of the rabbis in the same room having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to leave you and say thank you and say, yes, I think that's in my chapter, Abby. I'm going to show you guys one more thing, which is just fun, show and tell. So I've been unpacking stuff.
Judy, yeah, your son, that looks like one of the ceremonial.
This is in Megillah, my own. And
Wow.
I look forward to, is anyone else, who here is going to be reading next week? Michelle, what chapter? 4?
4.
4, great. Avi, I think you have a couple. What are you reading?
7 and 8.
Nice. And I got 3. And I look forward to reading with all of you. Judy Flightman has been working really hard on Purim shtick. Next year we'll have a full spiel, or maybe also a full spiel and party. But we got some good shtick talks, right, Judy? And Suzanne's working on the party. There's some other folks working.
Wait till you see Michael Golden's. I mean, Michelle.
No, he didn't do it. No.
Avi with Nancy and Barbara was great, but wait till you see Michael.
Michael didn't do one. No, Michael didn't.
Oh, excuse me.
Didn't do one. You'd have to guess who he is. Okay, I want to say have a great week to everyone. And from near and far, I will see you next week at 7 o'clock, God willing. Shabbat shalom, or wherever we are in the week.
Shabbat tov.